Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do.
In this episode, I interviewed Joy Gartner, Director and Counsel at the ABA Center for Innovation, whose curiosity-driven approach and all-figured-out attitude has helped the legal profession navigate the rapidly evolving landscape of AI and innovation.
Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host. I have good friend on, Joy Gartner. He is Director and Counsel of the ABA Center for Innovation, and he is an all-around great guy, and I'm really happy to have him on the show. How are you doing today, Joy?
I'm well, Tom. I'm honored to be here. It's great to get the chance to talk to you.
Likewise. You're in Chicago, right?
I am, and we are in that weird Chicago window where one day I might get 2 degrees and endless amounts of snow, and then it's going to be 55 and rainy on Christmas. So we're going to see just what happens this week.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of being in Chicago, but it's been in March, so it's not exactly thawed out yet. But
I've been in the Midwest my whole life, but specifically in Chicago for 18, 19 years now. Like, one thing that you learn when you move here is that your winter is cold, but from like April to September, October, most fun place you can possibly live in the whole world, because if you have to spend 5 months inside a year, you really make up for it for the other, 7 when you can get out of the house. So,
well, I know you've been working on lots of interesting things, and fortunately I get to work on the Center for Innovation with you. And I know that there's been a lot of AI review, analysis, consideration going on at the American Bar Association. And one of those things is the AI task force, right? So if you don't mind sharing a little bit with the audience about what that was, what it's done, and what's going on with that.
I appreciate you starting there, Tom, because as you and I know, I think one of the things we first connected over when we first became friends was AI and kind of that developing time period in 2022, 2023, post-ChatGPT boom, right? The AI Task Force was a 2-year presidential initiative launched under then-President Mary Smith of the association, which really aimed at looking at issues of artificial intelligence that were affecting the profession and doing kind of a large-scale undertaking and understanding of those issues. So we looked at AI in the courts. We looked at AI and how it was impacting access to justice issues, AI and its larger role in governance and policy, AI in law practice, AI in law school, right? It was really a cast a broad net and try to learn as much as possible. And in the course of that work, I think the task force produced something along the lanes of, 24 odd webinars over 2 years and 3 reports, a couple surveys, and the general result of the task force, which did conclude its work recently with its AI task force year 2 report, which came out about two weeks ago. So the timing of this is nice, Tom, really looks at how that concept, how that shifted, how we need to educate and understand within the profession, how these tools are being adopted in law practice, how are we thinking about governance and policy issues, and to really provide kind of a holistic starting point. One of the other interesting things that the task force kind of culminated in was a deeper understanding of the broad amount of work going on across the association. So, for those of your listeners who are non-ABA members, you know of it as an entity, but you don't really know the ins and outs. It's got voluminous amounts of sections dealing with specific issues. You have standing committees, you have working groups. It's a really large organization, very bureaucratic, but lots of different pieces of it doing lots of different work. And one of the things that we've discovered and been able to archive is kind of all of that work in one place across the association, so that if you are dealing with it from a business law or an international law perspective, the center and the AI task force now have all that information in one place. And it's, what's paywalled, what's not paywalled, what's free to the public, what's an article, what's a podcast, because there is a ton of resources available on this. And I think from the perspective of just trying to get your head wrapped around like what is available and what do we have, was in and of itself just a really big undertaking. So it's been a fun 2 years. It's been a breakneck speed of 2 years doing this work with the AI task force. And truthfully, Tom, I think it was work that I had not necessarily anticipated. The interest broadly in the profession that's peaked around AI in the last 3, 4 years has really created opportunities for those of us who are kind of nerdy and testing these waters beforehand. So,
Yeah. Thank you and the task force for doing all that work. It's just been 3 years, since ChatGPT dropped. I think people are finally starting to wrap their heads around it, and through, the good work that you're doing, that's helping people to get a better understanding of it.
to your point, it's been 3 years. The legal industry has definitely, in some ways, embraced and in some days retreated from this conversation. But I think what it's done very effectively also is it's kind of recognized that from a starting point, we're not all speaking the same language. When you look at where some of the kind of doom and gloom conversations versus some of the more practical use case conversations are taking place, there's a lot of different educational and content pieces you have to meet. I mean, we have created at the center a couple of drafts now of kind of an AI glossary that's really geared towards legal professionals just to understand the terminology. We're not going to tell you what to think about this, but it's really a matter of talking about it, understanding it. The most interesting part to me is just kind of having conversations with people on these topics and actually getting a sense of where people are starting from, right? Because it's so broad and it's so voluminous, and it's very easy to get lost in kind of buzzword concepts without really thinking about AI as the kind of tool-based approach that I think lawyers are a little more accustomed to.
100%. And that is a nice teaser for the audience about what we're going to get back into towards the end. But I do want to ask you about your origin story. As the audience knows, I like to get into people's business. You're in Chicago, but have you always been? Were you born there? Did you grow up in Chicago?
I grew up in Michigan, outside of Detroit. Diehard Lions, Pistons, Red Wings, Tigers fans. So living in Chicago can be fun, especially right now when the Lions are going down and the Bears are looking great. But did not get here until law school. So I spent most of my formative years in Michigan and ended up in Chicago when I'd started law school at John Marshall in 2007.
What was your town like in Michigan?
So I grew up in a suburb outside of Detroit where it was an interesting place to grow up, diverse community, very, mixed income, racially very mixed, really an interesting place to live in Southfield. Spent a lot of time also in rural Michigan with my grandparents as well. So I was I got to have a foot kind of in two different worlds a little bit when I was growing up, which was fun. Which I know you and I've talked about this before. That's where some of the fishing background and the more outdoorsy aspects of my personality came from. But, I grew up without any lawyers in the family. So this is something I've always found interesting, which is, my dad was a dentist and my mom was a kindergarten teacher. And so and my dad also taught at University of Detroit Dental School. So I grew up with a very experiential learning kind of approach in our home, right? Both my parents at their core kind of had similar educator-based values. There's not a lawyer. I mean, I don't genuinely recall meeting a lawyer until when I was in 7th or 8th grade and my dad had gotten involved in a lawsuit. And I remember meeting his lawyer and kind of, very stereotypical like 90s litigator approach, Tom, guy chain smoked, but really interesting to talk to. And I remember just kind of the way he thought about problems. I would sit around with my dad when he would talk about it. And I found the whole process very fascinating. Like many parents who have maybe somewhat stubborn or argumentative kids, I did get the same, well, you like to argue, you should be a lawyer conversation from my parents that I think a lot of us get, right? Which maybe is misguided, maybe wasn't. But that was a kind of interesting background because they both really approach things from an educational perspective. The first point I really remember exposure to like lawyer law, that kind of approach, besides my dad's case, was I did a career shadow day with a judge when I was, I think, a sophomore or junior in high school. And I just got to see kind of the inner workings of a courtroom a little bit. And what I was kind of fascinated with was less the cases and more the operations of it. How do you process this caseload? Where do people go? How do they know this information? What do you as a judge have to share with people? I found the operations of a courtroom kind of enamoring. And it was like, wow, there's a lot of moving pieces here that all culminate in these people's legal disputes. And that was kind of my first exposure to the workings of it outside of just kind of that like lawyer ethos.
Wow, and that was in high school?
Yeah, that was my sophomore or junior year of high school. I remember we got to do a career shadow. There was like three or four of us who got to do that.
Then you went on to Western Michigan University. You specialized like in three different areas, right? Like sociology, criminal justice, and philosophy. Was that like a standard track, or did you put those things together?
No, I mean, I think the one through line that I've always connected on that, because it was really kind of, those were things that interested me. I think I had kind of gone into undergrad thinking like, okay, I know that what I want to do next is law school, but like a traditional poli-sci kind of pre-law career, it didn't interest me the same way that I think these other larger questions were. So I kind of just I went the criminal justice and sociology route. Those were a little more linked. But the philosophy piece, I just kind of kept picking up as I went. And I thought, like, oh, I want to add this on. But I think the through line is they're all kind of consistently about looking the situation around you and being like, okay, how and why, right? Like they're those bigger questions of kind of trying to make sense of big things, small things, minuscule things, like when you talk about sociology, those are larger societal questions, but at its core, it's interpersonal relationships and people and how those things play together. When you look at philosophy, it's those larger questions of why, but those larger questions of why are still sort of about, like, again, the kind of structural functions we live within and how we relate to them. So I think there was this intellectual curiosity where just everything always seemed like it needed to be questioned a little bit, which I think, part of that is also I got from my dad, who was always kind of similarly situated, or just like to ask a lot of questions. And all of these were things where you got to pose questions, which I think I found interesting. The fourth one on there that I will say is living in Kalamazoo, you also get very accustomed to doing a lot of cross-country skiing. So, because you're out in the snow belt on the west side of Michigan. So that doesn't list as a fourth major, Tom, but it was probably equal in time. So,
Right, you're reading while you're going cross country. Yeah, okay. So your dad was similar, like he was a kind of argumentative, like to debate kind of guy, or
yeah, no, he was. I mean, he still is. So he's 83 now, and still in Michigan. Talk to him all the time. He was always very similar. He was the kind of parent who, if you said, "Hey, this is what I believe," or like, "This is my thought," he would push you on it a little bit. He would try to want to ask, okay, well, why are you thinking that? Like, where's your approach from? The same way that I think philosophy and sociology and those kind of undergrad topics I talked about require a little bit of skepticism about the things you looked at. That was something he instilled in us early, right? He was a Vietnam vet. He was he had a very interesting life. He'd gone through polio because he was born kind of pre-vaccines. Like he had the first half of his life is really fascinating. And I think one of the things he walked away from was just the sense of like, yeah, you should ask questions about things. It's okay to push back on things a little bit. And he still does that now in his 80s, Tom. So
what do you think you learned from your mom? Like what was one of the things that she inculcated in you?
One of the things that am perpetually grateful to my mom is she is a glass half full, find reasons to stay optimistic kind of person, right? And so I think one of the really most important parts that she's taught me is there's just a general resilience of hope, right? And there's a general resilience towards not giving in to gloom and despair when things feel difficult and finding reasons to kind of stay centered and to stay focused on positive movement forward. I mean, I think Tom, you and I have discussed this before. There are a lot of challenges that we face in work and other situations where it's very easy to feel despondent. It's very easy to feel like, oh, we're not making progress, or, oh, we're not getting where we want to go on this because of all the number of challenges we all face. But there's a core reality of like, well, where are the areas where I can have a positive impact and how can I make sure I'm focusing on that piece of it and staying optimistic? And so that was kind of the number one, that kind of positive resiliency. And the second one I'll give my mom, to her credit, was just a really strong sense of commitment to family and kind of commitment to community and friends. She was one of six kids. My sister and I were only one of two, but she was part of a big family. We grew up in a very close-knit family with my cousins, with my aunts, with my uncles. Like, it was a very close-knit community. And still in my 40s now, I rely on a lot of that community for my own resiliency and for my own positive impact. And I think I try to pass that on to my own family and my kids. So I think she kind of taught me that core value of those relationships in your life for your own resiliency and happiness and mental well-being. And so I take a lot of that away from her. Sometimes I give her a little bit of crap because, like, sometimes she'll say something so positive and I'll just be like, Mom, you got to relax on that a little bit. Like, it's okay to be upset sometimes. But, she's very much, glass half full, find those resiliency kind of pieces. And that has served me well in life, Tom.
Well, it certainly has, Joey. I think you have a very analytical and argumentative in a good way approach to things, but also like a very positive mindset. And I think that, sometimes I enjoy talking to you to reset, and see things in a better light. So thank you for that.
Oh, it's a nice thing to say, Tom. Thank you.
So after university, then you go to law school, University of Illinois. So was it like, when you were a kid and then like, hey, you might be a good lawyer because how did you end up there?
So I ended up in Chicago. I was two things I'd figured out when I was going to go to law school. One is my hope was to go somewhere in the Midwest. I wanted to stay local to both my family and also a lot of the Tom, this. I go back to Michigan all the time just for fun because it's where so much of my family and connections are. So I wanted to stay local in the area. And then the other part of it was I wanted to go somewhere where I felt like I could come out of law school knowing how to practice law. Going into law school, I was like, I want to be a litigator. I want to be able to hang out my shingle. I want to be Joey works for Joey, kind of that self-employed, do my work kind of thing. Where I ended up in Chicago really offered an opportunity. Strong legal writing program, very hands-on in terms of practical education. I spent 2 years doing clinical work on civil rights housing in law school and getting to work in eviction courts and all these other interesting places, which were very hands-on. So much so, I would work those on my winter breaks because I liked it. Like, I loved the fascinating approach of those. So I'd keep doing my clinical work over my winter breaks on occasion. I wanted practical, hands-on, learn to do something experience. And that's what I was looking for in my legal education. And that was the right program for me. I will tell you, the more heady property law classes, which were more Socratic, were a living nightmare for me for all kinds of reasons. But it just wasn't really how I absorbed that information that same way. So my 1.0 year was really challenging because it was before I got those experiential pieces. It was before I got to kind of learn on the fly. And instead, it was very much Socratic classroom, those relationships. And that was a hard piece for me to adapt to. If you were to ask me my 1.0 year, what I thought of law school, I think my opinion is drastically less positive than it was my 2L and 3L year. And not just because of the challenge of the curriculum, but just because of the way my brain was asked to kind of learn in that environment.
Yeah, I definitely get that. My 1L experience was a little off too, just because there's like this disconnect in terms of expectations versus what it actually is. I'm kind of fascinated, like, that you went to go for what is it, Illinois Legal Aid Online, but that was a fellowship, right? So you were still in law school when that was going on.
So that was that was my first year out of law school. Okay. I took part of a fellowship program through my law school, which actually tried to place worked to place its grads in nonprofit setting. I had a really strong background in law school with clinical work in the John Marshall Fair Housing Law Clinic, the place where I really absorbed what I wanted. And so because of that, I kind of got into the public interest sphere and started thinking along those nonprofit lines. The fellowship where I was able to get placed after law school at Illinois Legal Aid Online, I started that position while I was sitting for the bar. So it was before I was even a lawyer. And one of the tasks I got to do there was kind of to look at and revise and help write all of our self-help resources on housing cases, on housing law and evictions and all these things. And so it was something I'd been doing for 2 years as a law student, that I was now getting to create content and resources for self-represented litigants to get to use. And what stood out to me as I was doing that was like, oh, wow, this was one of those occasions where the idea of people law and the kind of self-representation that people deal with suddenly became very clear to me in a way I had never visualized before, right? And I had the complete privilege of working for some really talented people. Lisa Colpoys, who is still a dear friend of mine, was the ED there, and she took a little bit of an interest in me, and so she and I connected over a lot of the kind of unique approach that Illinois Legal Aid Online had. Uh, Tangent bar, Lisa Colpoys also will tell people a story of how I ate an ungodly amount of hot dogs because they were free at a at the Chicago Bar Association 5K, because it was right before the fellowship didn't pay great. So it was on that income. So it's like, oh, free hot dogs. So Lisa could tell a
Right.
story where I evidently ate my weight in hot dogs at Race Judicata one year.
Well, you got to do what you got to do, Joy.
Yeah, there's the time. And Tom, what's weird is that like that weird thing I developed for free meals in law school and in the first like year of my career, that has not gone away. Like if there's a free ABA lunch somewhere or a section has leftover food from a meeting, I'll be like, oh, I'll go find that. That is just a weird thing that's stuck in my brain that I can't resolve.
Well, I will keep that in mind. I think that's interesting as like a first step out of law school, because there's some people that are going to work at a white shoe firm or somewhere like, going to work in-house, and that you were focused on helping people, I think is really admirable. And it kind of curious what sparked that connection for you, like to test that out.
So it's twofold. I mean, one of the things that I will attest to, and happily admit, I think earlier in my career, it confounded me and it frustrated me in ways it doesn't now, is that, I don't think white shoe firms were ever really in the cards for me culturally. I think about the way I approach my world and how I approach issues, how I sort of think and problem solve. And there were some, the cultural challenges that I would have faced fitting in at a white shoe law firm. It's just there's a degree of formality. There's box fitting that I just never felt was really going to be right for me, right? And so I think on some level, I kind of viewed what I wanted to do in two different pathways, which is I wanted to be responsible to myself, right? So, I mean, my plan in many ways was like, okay, always be solo small firm GP, like, right? I want to kind of be that guy. But the other piece of it is I also didn't particularly feel strong connections to large corporate clients. I really liked people law. And one of the aspects that I learned from my clinical work when I was at John Marshall was I really enjoyed clients. And most of the clients we were working for were voucher recipients within the Chicago Housing Authority, right? We're living in structured housing. Like there were a lot of times we were dealing with clients who were bottom end of the income level. And what I found is I enjoyed having the opportunity to work with people in ways that could positively impact their lives, right? And to actually see what that could mean for them. And so I think from that perspective, the people law aspect of it always spoke to me, especially while I was practicing at Illinois Legal Aid Online. I was also doing some small solo and GP work on the side, largely in eviction court once I was barred. And if you ever want to really see the complete challenges and inner working of self-represented litigants, go to the Daily Center on a Tuesday morning and go to an eviction call in one of those courtrooms on the 15th floor. It is a voluminous, large, long call. And you will see people with lawyers, people self-represented. You will see all sorts of issues. But at the core of it is you understand this kind of, these are people both in some situations landlords and in some situations tenant who are dealing with unmet legal needs, right? And are just trying to solve what to them are very, very, very dire housing problems, but don't get the same kind of visibility because they're either, not financially profitable, right? Like I can tell you from having practiced landlord and tenant law, it's not an area you're particularly making a lot of money, but it's still this person's very unique issue dealing with one of their core needs, which is their housing, right? And so these were always areas where I just kind of, it opened my eye up to the degree of need. And I really liked the amount of impact you could have in people's lives in that space.
I hear you. I mean, when it comes to cases for regular people, they're life changing.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just a matter of a dollar figure or extra profit or something like that. It really can change their lives. Being able to use the expertise and the experience that you built up to accomplish, a life changing thing for people is really rewarding.
I've had bosses in the past tell me on some ways, like, sometimes you're too much of a mission guy, right? Like sometimes you lose sight of some of the operational or other challenges because you're always kind of larger mission and goal focused. I've never viewed that as a bad thing, right?
Mm,
That to me is part of who I am, right? Like that capacity and interest is what drives me to do a lot of the things I want to do. And so I'm not going to shy away or run from that part of my personality. Earlier in my career, maybe I did, but at where how I view it now, like, no, you have to be true to what you believe. And if what's driving you is the impact you can have in individual people's lives, like that's your body telling you something. That's your mind and
yeah.
brain telling you something. And you need to listen to that.
I mean, after that, you worked, you started your own firm, and you did that for I think around 5 years.
Yeah.
Just generally, like, what was that like?
So this is one of those things I laugh at now because it's amazing how well you think you know yourself when you don't really know yourself, right? So I left Illinois Legal Aid Online, had a friend that I'd worked with in some housing clinic situation, and he and I decided to partner up and start a firm, just the two of us. And we did that for about 5 years. And he still practices, brilliant lawyer. He and I laughed all the time because by about year three, what became clear to me is I loved the business of running a law firm and I loved the business of growing a law firm. I was exhausted by being in court, which is weird because I thought like that was what I thought would always be the thing that drove me because the first couple
Right.
of years it was. But that wore off around year three. And by the time I was kind of at year five of that, I think my first son had been born at that point, and I was just like, boy, I just don't really want to do this, not because I don't want to help these people or help my clients and help these things. A lot of the inefficiencies that
Mhm.
you see as a daily practitioner, and kind of, for lack of a better term, I think one of my mentors, Ed Voce, once referred to it as a gypsy lawyer, where you kind of practice out of your car in multiple county courthouses and you're all over the place. That part of the piece of that is you see how inefficient things run. And then you go to one courthouse and things run a certain way, but then the next one, you have to completely change your processes. And so over time, I became really burnt out on kind of the nuance of being a kind of courtroom lawyer. By the time I had wrapped up that chapter of my life, what it taught me was like, wow, I'm really frustrated with professionally how we approach this and how for practitioners this system is operating. And not only that, like if me as a practitioner who is this experienced and frustrated, how does this feel to self-represented litigant walking into court with less context, right? Like these are real things that kind of pushed me. The other part I will say about being that kind of solo GP practicing attorney that I didn't fully appreciate until I was kind of a couple years in was you don't turn it off, right? There's never a point in your day, in your week, in your month where you're not thinking about business, client, needing to get a new client. I remember taking client meetings on Saturday at 6:30 that were potential intakes from time to time based on what needs were, right? So like I think around that, and I think like it was really difficult for me. I always struggled to kind of develop the tools to turn that off and on. And so for me, it was practice 24/7, 24/7, 24/7, which I know you and I have talked about before. You felt some of those pressures as well.
Yeah, I think in some ways we're pretty similar about that because I think if you take your job and you take the people that you work for seriously, if you care about them and you want to do right by them, it's hard to turn it off because you're constantly thinking about what can I do different? How do I help them? And yeah, it could be a bit of a burden sometimes.
I will never be one of those people who say like empathy is a bad thing to have. You should always care about your clients. You should always care about their outcomes, their results, their lives, but you also have to be able to live your life simultaneously. And I was really bad at threading that needle.
Yeah, yeah, you got to take care of yourself too. I do want to jump ahead a little bit to the ABA because how did that come together? Like you had diverse experience at different places, and obviously this drive to want to connect with people and help people, and but at the same time, do it in an interesting, intellectually satisfying way. Like, how did that lead you to the ABA?
So I left my practice and I kind of went on a sort of 4 or 5 year wander through what I would kind of call the woods of legal operations, right, and legal processes. So went to a national bankruptcy firm, kind of came in and asked for entry level intake attorney role, was able to get interviewed for that, fit in well, really enjoyed myself, learned a ton about bankruptcy, but I also learned about larger law firm models and how do you run a national firm model and how do you distribute cases, how do you onboard clients, how do you get documents, how do you work with your partner attorneys. It was a really holistic experience to kind of see larger picture of how consumer law at scale nationally could function, and I thrived in that environment. Then I went and did that for a group legal services plan and a few other places where it was again very legal ops centric, very focused on understanding processes. How do we build from first initial phone call with client to end of case? What does that journey look like, right? And so it opened my eyes to client journey, UI, UX. Uh, a lot of times in terms of just like very simple customer service context that as lawyers we don't really always think about as customer service issues, but of course if you're dealing with clients and payments and all these issues, you are as a solo or GP that customer service person. You just don't think of yourself that way, right? It allowed me the opportunity to kind of reimagine all aspects of how law firms function. And so I got to do that with Upright. I got to do that with Debt Cleanse. There's some other places I worked in between there as well where I had the opportunity to do all that. And what I walked away from those experiences was, for the first time in my career, kind of while I was in that, what became clear to me is like the way law firms run is a business. And I think when I was running my own law firm, I knew it like intellectually, but I didn't always understand kind of what that meant. And what all these experiences pulled together for me was that what law firms are at their core are their businesses that deliver legal services. That's it, right? Like that is the core of what they do. Now, they do that within ethical rules, within guidelines, within attorney-client privilege, within all these other boundaries. But at its core, it is a business for the delivery of legal services to consumers, right? That's at least the experiences that I had with them. And so I had been at Debt Cleanse for about a year and a half. A good friend of mine, mentor, who was the chief operations officer there, Dave Danielson, who had been with Stretto and some other law firm software providers in the past, knew I was thinking about this ABA job and really pushed me to apply for it, and really thought like this is kind of the culmination of the work you want to do. And I'd only known about the ABA job because Chase Hurdle, my dear friend and fishing buddy, had worked at the ABA, and he and I had been on he and I ran in a very similar legal tech bubble in Chicago. We served on Illinois Legal Aid Online's advisory council together at one point. So he and I had a lot of overlap. And he left the ABA and he kind of nudged me to be like, I think you might want to consider applying for this. And I'm not sure I fully understood what I was applying for, right? I knew that I was applying to be deputy director of the Center for Innovation. The center dealt with all sorts of issues from innovations in technology to design thinking to regulatory approaches to ethics to all these other pieces of it. But I was coming purely as like a people law legal ops guy into this world. And that was kind of how I got to the ABA. And what I found when I got to the ABA as well was that there was a real buzz and conversation within membership bases, and especially in the Center for Innovation when I got there, that really wanted to focus on larger issues of the delivery of legal services, right? Thinking about how people consume law coming out of its study in 2016 on the future of the profession by William Hubbard and Judy Perry Martinez, who have a big role in founding of the Center for Innovation. And there was a real interest in this within the association, but at the same time, there was also 1,000 other moving pieces, right? And trying to sort of wrap our head around what the association thought of as innovation took some time, right? And it took some kind of unique thinking. And I think one of the challenges, and Tom, I have complained about this to you in the past, is it's very easy to equate technology equals innovation, right? Like it's very easy to fall into that logical fallacy of like, this is technology, it helps, so it must be innovative. And one of the things I really appreciate about the center then and still do now is that the center is open to ideas that are much broader than technology, right? And so I get to talk all the time about the skill set of future lawyers, which is, empathy, which is understanding client needs, which is building into frameworks of kind of meeting people where they are. It's also, of course, tech competency. I'm not going to set that as part of the conversation, but there's a piece of it that I think really allowed me to kind of explore the broader context of innovation. And then, AI slowly for the first 2 years and then very quickly became a very big part of that mission as well.
I mean, in a weird way, it sounds like a lot of your experience just really positioned you well to do what you're doing now.
I don't think I could have planned my career like any more chaotically than I
Yeah.
did. Like if you were to say like, what's the craziest way to get to where you want to go? Follow the route I took. Like it was, I did a little bit of everything, but I'm grateful for that experience because like we talked about a little bit early on, I've got that kind of skeptical, but also experiential sense. So I could have, known that, oh yeah, courtroom practice was not going to be for me. But the lessons I gleaned about why it wasn't for me are much more beneficial to the work I do now than they would have been otherwise than just saying like, oh, I don't like that, I'm not going to do that, right?
I mean, the work of the task force right now with the Center for Innovation, I know we have lots of interesting challenges in front of us on that. But one of them is a fun thing to look forward to and something that all of the audience can, ABA member or not, I think you can register for this event, the conference coming up, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about that.
Yeah. So this is actually, I will say, this is something that we will be on our third year of our AI and the practice of law. And this year it will be May 18th and May 19th. If you're interested in it, this save the date will be coming out very soon. So we look forward to having you. I will tell you this right now. We definitely built the plane in flight the first time we did this in 2024, right? Like we knew we wanted to do a virtual summit. We knew we wanted to have these topics on AI. But it was like, okay, we know we want to do this. How do we go about doing it, right? And what I will tell you is very early on in that journey, the Center for Innovation's Governing Council and its committee on this project really centered on this summit being about practical, actionable steps when it comes to AI. So we are not going to get into, is AI, going to destroy the world, deep philosophical policy questions. What we're going to talk about is you as a solo small GP firm, you want to use AI in your billing practices. What are the ethical considerations you need to think of for that? What are the things around disclosure that you want us to be thinking about? Okay, you want to use these for marketing purposes. How do you even do that? What does that use case look like? Tom, you've spoken on it, I think now both years. And one of my favorite sessions from any year we've done over this is the kind of recurring session you've done, which is AI isn't ready for prime time, I think was what we called it the first year. And I think the second year is like, what can it do? What can it not do? Right. And so like a lot of that is, okay, the information you may be getting about AI and use case and law practice, maybe you're getting it from a legal tech vendor. So it seems very rosy and here are all the outcomes, or maybe you're getting it more skeptically from someone who's had bad experiences or from you've got someone in your network who's uncomfortable with these tools, whatever it may be. What we want to tell you instead is like, hey, here's facts. Like, here's how these tools work. Here's understanding what they do. Here's understanding the things they're good at. So start thinking about that. And then here's understanding the parts you think, these are not what these tools are really designed for, and to start thinking that way. The other thing that I love about this summit, so it's 2 half days, uh, about 4.5 hours of content each day. Each year I get to do a workshop, and that is by far my favorite piece of it. And the workshop that I facilitate at these events is a workshop that focuses on actually thinking about where to start with your use case journey, right? And so this is all about kind of my passion towards that future skills lawyer need mindset approach that's kind of become my soapbox the last few years, the skills that future lawyers need. It's very easy to say, oh, here's AI and I can throw this at a problem. And I think if you like were at CleoCon like me or some of the most recent legal tech conferences, it feels like the AI conversation right now is like it can do everything all the time for you. And I think it's easy to think about that. But my thought process for it is like, sure, that is a reality. But more importantly, like, what do you actually need it for? And so I will kind of sit with attorneys, and we do tend to draw a bigger solo GP small firm market. One of the goals that the center has shifted towards the last few years is trying to be the de facto resource. If you don't have a chief innovation officer in your firm, what can the center provide you to start thinking about those journeys for you? And so we'll basically say, okay, look at your week, look at your workflow, look at your calendar. What's the one thing that's sucking up your time each week? What's the challenge? What's the second level of that? Once you've determined what the challenge is what about it is becoming so voluminous or complicated for you? And so for you, it's like an opportunity to just look at it and think, oh, hey, I actually can solve these problems. To me, the most important work that comes out of that summit is someone then goes back to their practice and does one thing. I'm not saying you go in and you overhaul everything you do. I'm saying you go back and you implement one work stream, one change, one tool that you weren't using before, because that has that snowballing compounding effect, especially like when you start to iterate and think of your mindset in that iterative mindset, which is the thing I like to yell at lawyers about the most these days. That compounds over time, right? Okay, so you've solved one problem. It's been 3 weeks. Okay, let's add problem 2. What does that look like? AI is drastically going to change the way lawyers work. I am a big believer that AI does not replace lawyers. It replaces tasks that lawyers do. And so you need to now think about how do you change your own workflow, change your own approach, change the way you look at this problem so that you're prepared for it. A few months ago, I spoke at a conference for a law firm and was approached after by someone who basically said like, hey, I've got a 23-year-old son and he's thinking about going to law school and I'm terrified for him for what AI is going to do to the profession. Like, what would you tell him? And my advice was like, well, it's twofold. One, there are a growing number of programs across the country at law schools that focus on training lawyers with AI skills. You can look at the work April Dawson's doing. You can look at the work Emery's doing. Like there's programs that specifically are designed to help your prospective law student son think about these. That's how I would be thinking about this problem. The second part of it is I would never tell your son don't go to law school. That's a personal choice. He wants to, great. But start developing cross-collaborative, innovative mindset, iterative thinking skills now. Don't wait till you go through law school and then start once you hit the workforce. These are skills you should be developing now. And in fact, due to probably having been in late middle school, early high school during COVID, there's probably some early resiliency skills that he can already draw on for that iterative mindset, right? So like, he's better positioned than you think. Don't be so concerned about it.
I really love the AI Summit's focus on like really practical skills and the way you bring it home with like, okay, forget all this like hype and magic stuff. Where do you get started? Like, and why would you start here? It's really good stuff. So for anyone out there who wants to get your head straight about AI, May 18th and 19th, right?
Yep, May 18th and 19th, 2026.
So definitely check it out and get registered for that because it's going to be a lot of great material. With that, though, I want to take us to the last couple of questions I ask all of my guests. We were talking off camera a little bit before we got started just about how we keep ourselves busy. And so I know you definitely have a lot going on, Joey. And if not, you make more stuff for yourself to go on. But with all of that stuff, how do you keep things balanced? Is there such a thing as a work-life balance, or do you just how do you keep things juggled and up in the air?
Two things work for me in this regard, Tom. One is I have four kids. So in some ways, my work-life balance is very much forced on me. When I am with my kids, I coach two youth basketball teams. I coach my kindergarten, or he's in first grade now. I coach his basketball team. I coach my fourth graders basketball team. In the spring, I coach soccer. I don't know anything about soccer, but I coach it. To me, my work-life balance is being engaged with my family and having that kind of touch point and stress release. And I enjoy kind of doing those activities with them. The other part is, and I think you and I have talked about this off camera in the past as well, you got to set boundaries, right? Like if you are not setting boundaries to make time to take care of yourself, you will progressively either become less and less healthy and less effective, right? And so like the most important thing you can do is set boundaries. And so I set some hard boundaries. I used to be the guy who would answer emails at 11:30 at night in bed before I fall asleep. I do not do that anymore. There is nothing in my world that is so urgent that by 10 a.m. or by 8 a.m., I can't get to it, right? And so I think it's just really forcing yourself into the position where you do set those boundaries for yourself to make space, because it's very easy to kind of fall out of repetitive habits when you're feeling stressed and anxious. But if you build those boundaries, it's a little easier to rebound to them once you do kind of slip off that a little bit. And then the third thing I will say is that I am very blessed to have a family and a wife who is constantly a reminder of like, hey, we need your attention too, right? Like we want to spend time with you. You have people in your life who want to be with you. And so it's really helpful to have an external force to help moderate that and bring that back when I tend to lose perspective. I'm very lucky in those regards.
Well, those are great words of advice, Joey. The last question I have, which kind of ties into it, what makes it worthwhile for you? Like at the end of the day, doing all these things, like what makes it worthwhile?
I've listened to the podcast enough to know this question was coming, Tom. And I was like, "Ooh, I'll have a great answer for it." And then I was like, "I don't have a great answer for it." I think for me at least, what makes all of this worthwhile is, I like what I do. Like fundamentally, I very much enjoy working at the intersection of all the different places I get to work at, right? So part of my job is tech and staying up to date on new technology, getting to play and demo new tools. Like that's a really fun part of my day. Part of my job is working with lawyers and legal professionals and allied professionals and community justice workers. Like getting to work with people who are delivering frontline legal services, even though I no longer do that work, I gain a sense of fulfillment knowing that resources, information, tools we create help enable those people to be more effective, to learn, to share, to like that to me is part of the deal because I will say I miss that part of it, but not at the expense of running my practice and doing those other things. The third part of it, though, that I'll also say kind of like what keeps me going and what makes it worth it is the ABA is a large bureaucratic entity, right? And so things change slowly within the ABA. Sometimes they change when it comes to policy. Sometimes it changes with kind of just, presidential initiatives, like the AI initiative wasn't really on the association's radar prior to the ChatGPT boom. And then it became a really big priority. And so part of also what keeps me going is the idea that like, okay, change may be incremental, but there's always going to be opportunities to engage with new things, right? Like the AI piece specifically, when I got here in 2020, like that was not on the table, right? As a major focus of our work and what we were doing. And now it's 50 to 60% of what my portfolio of work is. There's opportunity. And so I think part of also what keeps me going is just that skepticism, right? That what we talked about it before, that kind of asking like the why and how questions. I still get to do that now. And I think like as those things come up, I don't like to shy away from things. I think I mentioned this briefly that I had Dave Danielson, who I worked with before, once told me that perhaps the thing that serves me most well in life is that when asked to build a project or figure out how to do something, my answer has never been like, no, I can't do that. My answer is, I'm not sure how to do that, but I'll figure it out. Right. And like, I think it's that like just long-term curiosity. I'm grateful to work in a space where that's needed. Knowing that that's still there for me and gets to be there for me kind of is what keeps me going.
Well, thank you so much for the work you do, Joey, because I think you're really making a difference. And, the way you do it is, I think, really engages people. You disarm people naturally with your with your personality. And I really appreciate you being on my show.
This has been an absolute pleasure, and I'm glad you finally ran out of enough talented people to find time for me. So,
Well, for everyone out there, you're probably interested to know how you could follow Joey. So how can they keep in touch with you and learn more about the Center for Innovation and the conference coming up?
yeah, absolutely. So please go to our website at the Center for Innovation at the American Bar Association, where you can find some other projects we didn't even get to talk about today, like our innovation trends report. We have some really cool resources that's really geared towards hand-on approaches. So I would encourage you all to come check us out at the center, which is americanbar.org/Center for Innovation. We are on LinkedIn. We're not exactly the most post-heavy on LinkedIn. You can also follow me on Blue Sky. That is largely going to be Detroit sports tweets, though. That's where I get out my outlet for my Detroit Lions anger these days. But there are really a lot of cool resources you can check out on the center's website. I'd encourage you to check out. If you're going to do it, here are the two I would check out besides the summit. Check out our innovation mapping tool. This is a point-and-click map all across the country that tracks rural practice initiatives from state and local bars, AI guidance from different state and local bars, community justice workers, all kinds of stuff. Check it out. It's really cool. And check out our innovation trends report, which is just like really fun, easy, light, not a white paper read, very easy, light read, lots of interactive pop-out boxes, a really cool way to learn about some anecdotal stories about how people are innovating and what they're doing in legal delivery these days.
Well, that's some good stuff. You all check it out. And Joey, thanks again for being on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And for all of you out there watching, thank you so much. See you next time.
Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.